If you're looking to trim down your grocery bill this year like I am, one of the best things that you can do is figure out how to make meals with the least amount or minimal ingredients. But that also doesn't mean you need to sacrifice flavor. So in today's video, I'm gonna share with you all 5 casseroles that you can make. You can make all of these casseroles for 5 ingredients or less. We're gonna make a really delicious chicken broccoli cheese stuffing casserole. We're also making a super easy ravioli bake that is kid-friendly. We're making scalloped potatoes with ham, my personal favorite, tater tot casserole. I'm also gonna make some chicken and noodles, and last but not least, a delicious recipe for M&M cookies, which isn't technically a casserole, but you're getting a bonus dessert with today's video. All the recipes I used in today's video will be linked in the description box below, so let's hop right into these delicious recipes. So for all of these casseroles, I'm going to need either cooked chicken or cooked ground beef, well, all except for one of them. But what I like to do, especially if I know I'm going to be making all of these recipes, is kind of batch prep my proteins ahead of time. So for the chicken, I've got some chicken breasts in the bottom of my Instant Pot. You can season these however you want. I'm just using some Lowry's seasoning salt, and then I'm going to add about 1 cup of chicken broth. I just made sure to season these really generously because I wanted the chicken to be flavorful. If you don't have an Instant Pot, you could also cook these in the slow cooker or just on the stovetop. And what I'm going to do is cook these on high pressure. I believe I cooked them for 10 minutes. That makes the chicken tender, and then you just let it cool before you shred it, which I'll show you here in a minute. But I do love cooking chicken breast in the Instant Pot. It comes out really well, and it's also really hands off. So once it was cool enough to handle, I went ahead and cubed some of it. This is going to be for the broccoli chicken stuffing casserole, and then I'm also going to shred some of the chicken. So depending on kind of what recipes you're going to use your chicken in, I do think there's a difference between shredding and cubing the meat. Like for the chicken noodles that I'm going to make, I actually prefer shredded chicken in that, and prepping this ahead of time just makes my life so much easier. Also, if you wanted to put these casseroles together ahead of time and throw them in the freezer, you could totally do that as well. Once I got my chicken in the containers, I'm just taking some of that broth in the bottom of the Instant Pot and ladling it over the chicken so that it doesn't dry out in the refrigerator. I have about 4 cups of shredded chicken, so you'll see how I use that throughout the rest of the video, and I'm just putting that into some containers and popping it in the fridge. Next up, I'm going to brown up some ground beef. So I just have some 85-15 lean ground beef in my pot. I'm adding salt and pepper, and I also like to add a bit of dried minced onion to that as well. I like it because I don't really prefer like huge chunks of onion in my ground beef, and neither do my kids, but you can still get that onion flavor. So I believe this was about 2 pounds of ground beef. I'm going to end up using 1 pound in the Tater Tot Casserole and the other pound in the Ravioli Bake. So I just removed 1 pound of that to a bowl. I'm going to set that aside, and I'll stick it in the fridge for when I make the Tater Tot Casserole. But with my 1 pound left in my pot, we're going to go ahead and put together the Ravioli Bake. So the reason why I love this recipe is because it's super family friendly. Most kids love ravioli, right? And you can also make this ahead of time and put it in the freezer for a freezer meal if you wanted. So I'm using the Great Value marinara sauce. This is actually the most inexpensive marinara sauce that you can get at Walmart. I actually really love the flavor of it. It's super cheap and it works well, but what I do like to do is use a little bit of water and kind of wash out the jars and pour that into the sauce. It does loosen up the sauce a little bit, which is important because you're going to be cooking the frozen ravioli in the casserole in the oven. And then it also just makes sure that you don't waste any of that tomato sauce that's left in the jar. So at this point, after you add the sauce to the ground beef, you just want to season this to taste. I usually add a spoonful of sugar just to cut the acidity in the tomatoes a little bit. And I am going to shred up some mozzarella cheese. I had this whole milk mozzarella on hand, which I really do prefer for dishes like this, but it does require you to grate it yourself. So if you don't have time, definitely buy the pre-shredded mozzarella cheese. It's going to be just fine. Of course, I had to pay the cheese tax to Murphy because he is cute and I cannot resist
done shredding my cheese.
So if you're a busy mom, you know that all too well. Sometimes taking care of yourself tends to be at the bottom of your priority list. One way that I make sure that I take care of myself is by regularly going to therapy. In fact, I was just out of town last week for work, and even though I was out of town, I was still able to have an appointment with my therapist. That is why I am thankful for today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I have worked with them previously here on my channel, and I have personally also used their services over the years. And like I said, I love the fact that I can access therapy without having to drive to an office. Right now, I'm using therapy to talk through some of my goals for 2025. I want to get clarity on what I want to focus on this year to not only make myself a priority, but also balance my hobbies and career and my family as well. I've used BetterHelp in the past to work through really complicated grief after my mom unexpectedly passed away, and it was super helpful for me to be able to process that with someone. It was really an invaluable tool. This new year is a blank slate for you to write your own story, and BetterHelp makes it super easy to get started. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire, and they will match you with a therapist in as few as a couple of days. BetterHelp is fully online, which I love because you can attend appointments in the comfort of your own home. You can connect with a therapist from their diverse network of over 30,000 licensed professionals who have a wide range of specialties and backgrounds. The other thing I really like about BetterHelp is they make it easy to switch therapists at any time with no extra cost if it's not the right fit. You can also take comfort in the fact that they carefully ensure therapists on their platform are well qualified, and their customer support team is always there to answer any questions you might have. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5-star rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. I can vouch for the fact that their therapists have helped me through some of the most challenging times in my life. I'm here to encourage you to make yourself a priority this year, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. So head down to the description box below. I'll have a link down there. You can go to betterhelp.com/Jen Chapin. This link is going to give you 10% off your first month of therapy. Make sure you take advantage of this offer. Start fresh for the new year. Start taking care of yourself. I cannot explain how helpful it is to be able to talk things out with an unbiased therapist. Once again, the link is betterhelp.com/Jen Chapin. It'll be in the description box below, or you can also tap the screen right here if you're on your phone.
So the ravioli bake is super easy to put together. I am baking mine in a regular dish, but like I mentioned before, if you want to do this ahead of time, you could totally do it in a freezer pan. I do like to grease my pan with a little bit of nonstick cooking spray, and then make sure you ladle a good bit of sauce on the bottom. This is going to prevent your first layer of ravioli from sticking to the pan. For this particular recipe, I'm going to use cheese ravioli. However, if you wanted to make it even easier, you could use beef ravioli, and then you wouldn't necessarily have to put the meat in the sauce. This is just how my family prefers it. So basically, you're just going to do layers of sauce, ravioli. I do like to line them up to make sure I get even coverage, and then more sauce, and then more ravioli, more sauce, more ravioli. I do about 3 layers. I do make sure to put plenty of sauce on there, because as this ravioli cooks in the oven, it's going to absorb a lot of that water out of the sauce. So you want to make sure that there's enough sauce so it can cook and it's not dry when it comes out of the oven. Last but not least, you just want to sprinkle with some mozzarella cheese before you do your next layer. So just keep layering until the dish is full, or until you're out of ravioli, whichever one comes first. Once you've got everything put together, you're just going to cover this with foil and pop it into the oven. I believe I baked mine at like 400 degrees for 45 to 50 minutes. You just want to make sure that all the ravioli is cooked through. I did have some extra sauce left, which I threw in the fridge for leftovers. Along with this dinner, I'm going to make some salad and some bread. I found a head of romaine in the fridge that needed to be used up, so I'm just chopping that up, and I'll give it a wash in my salad spinner. And then for this salad, I was just basically using up things that I had in the fridge. So lettuce, I found some cucumber in my crisper drawer. I also found like half of a red pepper, went ahead and chopped that up and added it to the salad as well. And then I am using these sourdough baguettes that I get from Wild Grain. I always keep some of their bread in my freezer. It's a great side for casseroles, soups, stews, things like that. So I threw that in the oven to bake here is what the ravioli casserole looks like when it comes out of the oven, hot and bubbling. Just make sure you let this sit for, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes before you scoop it out, so that it has a chance to set up. But I served this up in some bowls with some buttered sourdough baguette on the side. This turned out so good, and it makes great leftovers as well. And this is one of the things that I make that no one in my family ever complains about. And then we had our salad on the side with some ranch and some freshly cracked pepper on top. Next up, we're going to make my favorite casserole of all time, and this is a tater tot casserole. I don't know what it is about tater tot casserole. Maybe it just like has that nostalgia for me because I feel like I ate it a lot as a kid. But I'm taking a pound of my hamburger that I had browned up, putting it in a skillet just to warm it through with some Worcestershire sauce. That is optional, but I do like to add that because I feel like it gives it a little bit more flavor. I like to add 1 can of cream of chicken soup, and then I just add enough milk, maybe like a half a cup, to thin it out just so you have a little bit more sauciness in the bottom layer. And then I prefer to also cook my vegetables in the microwave before I add them to the meat mixture because I want to make sure that my veggies aren't frozen. This is going to cook in the oven for as long as it takes the tots to cook on the top. So usually like 400 or 425 for about half an hour. But I went ahead and stirred this together, and then I grabbed a baking dish. This is a little bit small for a 9x13 pan, so I like to bake it in an 11x7 pan. But if you want to double this recipe and use a 9x13, if you have a larger family, you can totally do that too. So once I put the meat mixture in the bottom of my pan, I just like to spread it out so that it's even on top. And then you want to add your cheese. So when I was growing up, we always used American cheese on our tater tot casserole. Some people like to use cheddar. You can totally use whatever you like. I like the singles, kind of like the Kraft singles. That's what tastes the best to me because I feel like the cheese melts into the meat mixture, and it's a Midwestern delicacy. I also do take the time to line up my tots so I can get even tot coverage, and then just popping this in the oven to bake. Here's what it looks like when it comes out. This is also a super easy casserole to assemble and freeze or refrigerate ahead of time. This is a great thing to take to a potluck or to take to a friend if they've just had a baby or got out of the hospital or something like that. Love this. I do let it set for about 10 minutes before I spoon it out into bowls. And this is like pure Midwestern comfort food. I love it. I swear I can have this once a week and not get tired of it. Hope you guys try it. Okay, so next up, we're making a super easy dish. This is scalloped potatoes and ham, and this meal is also super cheap. I got all of these ingredients for around $9 at Walmart. So I've got 2 boxes of scalloped potatoes, some ham steaks, a bag of peas, some milk, and some butter. So the first thing I'm going to do is make my scalloped potatoes. So I'm going to add some water to a saucepan and put that on to boil. And I want to mix all of the potatoes and the ham and the peas together in a big bowl before I spoon them out into the casserole dishes so I can make sure that everything is kind of evenly distributed. So I put my sauce mix and my butter in a big bowl, and then I'm just adding my hot water, and I'm going to whisk that until it all comes together. I would recommend whisking up your wet ingredients with the sauce mix and the butter before you add the potatoes, just so you can make sure you get everything combined and there aren't any big clumps of powdered cheese in there. I went ahead and added my milk, stir that up, and then you can go ahead and add the potatoes. So these potatoes are a little bit misleading because when you pour them out of the box, obviously they are dehydrated and dried. So it kind of seems like it's not going to be a lot, but obviously as this bakes in the oven, those potatoes are going to rehydrate with all of the liquid in the casserole. So added those, added my peas, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut up the ham steak. So this ham steak, you actually get 2 pretty good sized ham steaks in a package from Walmart for $3.50, which I think is a really great deal. I actually only ended up using 1 ham steak for all of this casserole. And then I saved the other one for breakfast the next morning. But if you want more ham in it, totally put more in there. Whatever you want to do is fine. If you don't like peas, you can definitely leave those out or substitute green beans or something else. So I am making some different sized casseroles with this recipe. This particular one, I am making the larger one to take over to my grandparents' house. And then I also have these smaller casserole dishes, and I went ahead and used those for meal prep for the week for Adam to take to work. So I put all of these on a baking tray so that I could transfer them to the oven easily, baked them per the package directions, and here is how they turned out. This is a great dinner to have even by itself. You could add some bread and butter on the side, you could add a salad on the side, or some raw veggies or some fruit. Super simple and easy to make and super cheap. Okay, next up we are making this broccoli chicken stuffing casserole. This was a new recipe for me and I really like it. So I have a box of chicken stuffing mix, some broccoli cheese soup. This is the condensed version from Campbell's. I've got some of my cubed cooked chicken, some broccoli florets, and some sharp shredded cheddar cheese. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start my stuffing mix. You want to cook the stuffing per the package directions. So basically just boil some water with some butter. And then while that is boiling or coming to a boil, I'm going to mix up the chicken mixture. So I'm adding some cubed chicken to a bowl. I'm going to go ahead and add my condensed broccoli cheese soup. And then basically this casserole is layered. So you have kind of your veggie meat mixture on the bottom, and then a layer of stuffing, and then a layer of cheese on the top. So once the water came to a boil, I just turned the stove off, adding the stuffing mix to that, stirring it up, and then all you have to do is put a lid on it and let it sit for like 5 minutes to rehydrate. And for the broccoli mixture, I kind of wished I would have cut these broccoli florets up a little bit before I put them in the bowl. This was my first time in a long time using this broccoli from Walmart, and I just feel like the florets should have been smaller. So next time I make this, I'll make sure to do that. I'm using an 11 by 7 dish, and I'm adding that broccoli chicken mixture to the bottom of the dish after I sprayed it with some nonstick cooking spray just to make sure that nothing sticks to the bottom. I'm going to spread that out into an even layer, and then here's what it looks like in the pan. You can go ahead and taste that and see if it needs any extra seasoning like salt or pepper or garlic powder. Once the stuffing is done setting, you just want to fluff it up with a fork. I do think if I had to make this over again, I probably would have made the stuffing a little bit more moist, just because you do end up baking this in the oven and it does dry out a little bit. So just keep that in mind if you're going to make this recipe. Like I said, I'll link it down below. This was a Taste of Home recipe. Once the layer of stuffing is on, you're just going to cover that up with some foil and pop it into the oven and bake per the recipe directions. This particular recipe has you add the cheese at the very end and then take the foil off to melt it, obviously just to make sure that the cheese doesn't get burnt and dry out on the top. So once the casserole is done baking, I remove the foil, added the shredded cheddar cheese to the top, and I'll pop that back into the oven just to melt the cheese and make sure everything is cooked through. Also, if I had this to do over, I would probably use freshly grated cheddar cheese that I grated on my own, just because I feel like it grates a lot more, or it melts a lot creamier than the packaged shredded cheddar cheese does. But again, this is a super simple recipe, great for picky eaters because these are like very plain but still delicious flavors. I went ahead and scooped this out, and that chicken combined with the stuffing and the broccoli and the cheese is such a delicious combination. I almost said conversation. No, it's a delicious combination. Okay, so I'm kind of cheating with this one a little bit. I'm going to show you guys how I make chicken and noodles with 5 ingredients or less. I know this isn't really a casserole, but I make chicken and noodles all the time, and I was making it this past weekend, and I thought, hey, this has minimal ingredients. It's pretty cheap. Why not throw it into this video? So you're getting a bonus. You're getting a bonus casserole recipe that's not really a casserole. So I have these egg noodles as well as some chicken, some carrots, and some celery, and some chicken bouillon powder. I'm going to go ahead and cut up my veggies. You could also throw some onion in here if you wanted to. I don't actually always put veggies in my chicken and noodles. It just kind of depends how much time I want to take and what I have on hand. But I did have some veggies in my refrigerator that I wanted to use up. So I just like to kind of chop these small. And what I do is I put a big pot onto the stove, heat it over medium heat, add some oil and my carrots and celery, and I just want to saute those until they're a little bit soft. These are also going to boil along with the chicken broth, so they will finish cooking the rest of the way. While those are cooking, I am going to mix up some chicken bouillon. I really love the Knorr chicken bouillon. I keep big containers of this on hand in my pantry because I just find it so much easier to reconstitute, and you don't have those big cans or boxes of stock or broth in your pantry to deal with. I also like the flavor of this. I think it's a lot more flavorful than canned or boxed broth. So I'm going to go ahead and add 8 cups of broth to my pot along with my carrots and celery. And then once that comes to a boil, I'm going to add my noodles and just cook those per the package directions. I'm using the Hy-Vee brand of thick noodles. These come in the freezer section, but if you don't have a Hy-Vee, just look for the Reams brand of frozen noodles. They are thick and substantial noodles, and they will not fall apart like sometimes a traditional egg noodle will. After the noodles are almost done cooking, I went ahead and added the shredded chicken, and I'm just going to go ahead and stir that around. At this point, I do like to add a mixture of cold water with a couple tablespoons of cornstarch. That is optional. You definitely don't have to do that, but I like the way it kind of makes it more like a stew instead of a soup. And just season it with salt and pepper, and this is done. Boom. Super family friendly. Everyone's going to love it. Okay, so last recipe I said I was going to show you guys was some M&M cookies. I've never made this recipe before, but I'll link it down below. I actually made this because even though it is like a month after Christmas, I still have a huge jar of red and green M&Ms left over. And I was like, how can I use these? Okay, I'll make M&M cookies. So obviously it's your standard kind of cookie recipe of butter, creams with brown sugar and white sugar, and then you add some eggs and some vanilla, your flour and leavening agents. This particular recipe does call for chocolate chips along with M&Ms. I think you could totally substitute all M&Ms if you didn't have any chocolate chips on hand, but I did have about half a bag of chocolate chips left in the pantry, so I went ahead and threw those in. And then this particular recipe directs you to make bigger scoops of cookie dough than your traditional kind of like 2 tablespoon scoop. I think this is closer to like a 1/4 cup. So I just use my cookie scoop for that. Pop these in the oven and bake them until they are done. The key with chocolate chip cookies, or really any cookie, is that you don't want to over bake them. So when you take them out of the oven, it's almost going to look like they're not done on the top, but if you looked at the bottom of them, they're nicely golden brown. They do finish cooking a little bit as you take them out of the oven, and then obviously they become more firm as they cool on the cooling rack. So I let those cool on the baking sheet for a couple minutes, remove them to a cooling rack, and my kids said these were some of the best chocolate chip / M&M cookies that they have had. So I definitely recommend this recipe. I'll link the one I used down below, and use any color of M&Ms that you like.
So don't forget to check out today's sponsor, BetterHelp. I'll have that link in the description box below. If you want to take advantage of 10% off your first month of therapy, highly encourage you all to try it. Let me know also in the comments which one of these recipes that you'd like to try. If you want to see how I put together 3 dinners on an extreme budget of less than $30, you can click on this video right here.